I think it's recording. So there's that. There's a blinky light. So I think that's it. All right. It's not a Zoom meeting without the complete, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, well, welcome to DenverScript, the socially distanced version. So tonight's schedule, as normal, we do the intro, job announcements. If you have job announcements, please put them in the chat to this, and then we can post them out later as well. At 6-ish, depending how fast we get through this, we have Mr. Phil Lux talking about Lodash, or wait. Sorry, I get my materials mixed up. Oh, yeah, no, don't mutate it, Immer it. And then at 6:15-ish, we will have the amazing Kyle Coberly talking about data transformations with Lodash, which sounds like, based on what Kyle said, they should be a very complimentary talk. So sounds like fun. And then we'll have questions and closing thoughts, I guess. So job announcements, please post them in the chat. And if you want to, feel free to reach out to Guillermo, Mike, or myself on Denver Devs if you would like to talk more about anything that we can help post out. So we are an open collective, and if you can, please give us just even a little bit of money, because that helps pay for our Meetup account and our pro Zoom account and just those kind of things. Luckily, operating costs have gone down, so just even a little bit of help will actually go a very long way with us. But thank you, Garrett and Ian, who have been long-time recurring $5 a month contributors. Very appreciative of them. You can also, it doesn't have to be recurring. You can give just a one-time donation of any amount you want to. So it's just opencollective.com/DenverScript. And if you forgot what it was and you still want to give, just let me know and I can get you the link. Call for speakers. We're always looking for speakers. And I think even next month, like, we have possibly a speaker lined up, but even then, I don't have that in writing yet. So please feel free to reach out to us. You can actually, we have a bit.ly link for submitting talks. It's just bit.ly/ds-talks. And I'll put that in the chat once we kick it over to Phil. Also, we have code of conduct here. Be excellent to each other. Also, there is Bill and Ted 3 coming out on the 28th. Yeah, I'm gonna watch that.
Awesome.
Be inclusive, invite others to chat. While that is so much harder when we're trying to do a Zoom call, but like, these are things we'll buy when we go back in person too. Hopefully sometime next year. No statement questions like, well, here's what I think. It's, kind of saying up the speaker there. It just kind of feels not cool. If you want to see the full code of conduct, you can go to DenverScript.com, which also has the links to Open Collective, our YouTube channel. It's basically just a link farm of just all of our stuff. So cool. What's going on in JS land, you ask?
Right, JavaScript land. So I'm gonna give the DevTools team one more month. They used to put out these really nice like highlight reel videos of like the changes that had come out in the recent Chrome releases for the actual DevTools stuff specifically. Granted, they were usually like 1 or 2 releases behind. I'm not sure why, but they would be. But now we're on like, I think Chrome 83 or 84, and they still haven't put anything out since 81. So if by next month they don't have something, then I guess I'll be forced to RTFM and just read the release notes instead of just going through the highlights video. But in the meantime, for those of you that remember a while back, we pointed out in one of the DevTools talks, this cool thing in Chrome that lets you look at accessibility ratings like AA versus AAA. And actually, Matt, if you want to go ahead and maximize that.
There we go. Oh.
So this AA and AAA score has been around for a while, but there's this cool thing. Actually, Matt found this link that somebody pointed out that in in the newest Chrome in DevTools, now not only does it give you that score, but actually when you open up the matrix with those 2 lines for AA and AAA, you can click on this little, looks like a revert type button, and it drops it down to the next line, so you're compliant. And I guess I kind of skipped a little bit of the background there. For those of you that aren't familiar, for usability, especially people that have difficulty with contrasts and colors, AA and AAA are accessibility score ratings for how accessible and how readable the contrast is between your text and its background. And so can you pause this when it goes up to when it gets to the point where it has the 2 lines? Is this possible? All right, sweet. Oh, right there. Perfect. Oh no.
Wait, you're talking too late.
Oh, maybe I'm lagging. But if you can pause it like where it shows the 2 lines.
Which, oh, okay, I know what you mean now.
Yeah, once the graph there. Cool, thanks. So so you can see here, like again, just some background on this feature that has been around for a while. Everything that is above sort of that first curved line fails the AA contrast rating. Anything between the first and the second line, this is from top down, fails AAA, but is AA compliant. And then anything below that second line is AAA compliant for usability for contrast ratio. And so now one last time, what we'll see here is when Matt hits play, he's above that line. He's going to click this little button, and it's going to pop it down to that first line, and it's automatically now going to check mark that he's AA compliant. So nice little to have thing. But yeah, pretty cool. So that's all that we have to highlight specifically about DevTools this month. Thanks, Matt, for finding that. All those little, they already have all these cool things, and then every little thing that they add that makes it a little bit easier to use makes us all a little bit more productive. So what in the nice HE double hockey sticks? That sounds like a Frasier entry. Yeah, so that is that. As we always say, we now ask anything that you guys are excited about. And this can be, like I always say, something that could be like industry level, broad, like really big stuff. Or it could be just stuff that you're excited about that's been around for a long time. Like I always say, like I think CBS used to say this, like with reruns. Like if you haven't seen it, it's new to you. If it's something that maybe you just worked with for the first time, or maybe you found a new pattern, a new way of solving a problem. Doesn't matter if it's been around forever. If it's new to you, then maybe it's new to somebody else. So what are you guys excited about this month?
There's a new TypeScript.
What was that? Sorry?
New TypeScript.
Cool. New version of 4, is that what you said?
I believe so.
Sweet. Do you know of any exciting features or anything, not to put you on the spot, but anything cool about it that you've heard, or you just heard that it came out?
The one that jumped out to me was optional chaining.
Okay. Sweet. And for those not familiar with optional chaining, Matt, do you want to draw a sample optional chain for us under there, just so you can see it, so people can see it? Exactly. So if you had like an object, and it may or may not have these different properties, instead of having to do like sup and sup.myObject and sup.myObject.foo, you can do this optional chaining, which is a really nice way of doing that. Cool. What else you guys excited about?
We swapped out Redux forms for React Hook forms, and it is crazy fast compared.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How was that migration?
It was pretty. I didn't actually do it. I just reviewed a lot of code, but just from a user standpoint, it improved loading, re-rendering was reduced. Just everything about it was easier to implement truthfully.
That's awesome. And for those of you guys not familiar with Redux forms, it's a really cool way that you can keep track of complex forms in the Redux store, especially if you have like a few different ones on the page at the same time, or if you need to navigate. But the problem with it is that for literally every single keystroke, you're updating the store for like every single typing character. So I bet
it's also heavy. It's also bloated as shit.
Right. You probably don't need, and this is why like a lot of other solutions that come out, like you probably don't need to be updating your global store every time a user enters a key in some field in some form. That's cool, man. It's exciting to hear for you guys. Congratulations. What else are you guys excited about?
Didn't React 17 come out?
Oh yeah. And
With
didn't it
no
have,
new updates.
right, exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. Like, is it React 17 came out and then it said no new updates. And it's like the last release in like past like year and a half.
It said very minimal, or what? And it just had like very little breaking changes.
It's to support when they go to 18 is really what it's for.
Yeah, I think it was mostly removing everything that they're like, all the deprecation warnings, and they're like, hey, just remember, this shit's gonna break.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that, if this is the one that removes all of those.
I believe so, but somebody please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it is cool how they did that though, where like they kept supporting it, but then they were forcing you to type its name with this huge like unsafe at the end of like every time that you used it. Like you were forced to type the name unsafe as part of like the call if you wanted to keep using it.
It's called life cycle shaming.
Exactly. So you feel bad about yourself every time you're typing it in. Like I thought that was a really great like distributed social engineering to just, because I know I just stopped using it because I felt like a dick every time I was typing like unsafe. I was like, okay, I probably shouldn't be doing that. Cool. What else?
Hey, Karima, if I could jump in there, I'm learning React right now. Is there anything you guys would have liked to see in a new release or are looking forward to in 18?
Well, I'll let the community speak up. Is there anything in particular that, let's get one thing from somebody, something that you've heard about that's coming in a future React release that you're really excited about, that maybe that the React team's been talking about for a while. That's a good question, by the way. Anyone?
Suspense? Is that out yet?
It's out, but it's still considered not exactly stable.
That's the one where you get like async props and stuff, right?
Actually, I wish they would get, so they deprecated hot reloading, and then they came out with this other one, and I think it was specifically developed for React Native. I forget what the hell it was called, but they're like, hey, you can kind of make it work, but not so easily in your web app project. And it's like, I would just love like hot reloading to actually be a thing and not just I saved my page and it's like, oh, want me to just auto refresh that for you and get rid of all your state?
Right. Cool. Also, one thing that we added on with our remote meetups here is the how are you staying sane. This has been interesting to kind of see how this has evolved. Like I said last time, it started out with everybody saying like virtual happy hours or I'm making sourdough bread, and so like it's interesting to see like how these things have evolved over time.
It's okay if you're still making sourdough.
If you're still waiting on getting the starter yeast. But yeah, anybody have any interesting new strategies that maybe you've discovered in the past month or two that have worked for you? Especially now as this kind of goes from being like hey, we're all going to be socially distancing for a week or 3 tops, and now we're in it for the long haul. Anyone got any like cool new things that you've that's been working for you lately?
I figured if I'm going to be home all day long, that started as being like, there's no reason this place shouldn't be spotless. And now it's progressed to the point where I was like, well, I can take care of more houseplants now. So I bought a new fern. I've killed 3 before this one, and they're like $20. So the stakes have really never been higher for me.
That's awesome.
I can share.
Yeah.
I'm learning how to shuffle on Saturday morning.
Learning how to what?
Like shuffle dance. Like to like dance music.
Oh, cool.
Rules.
Nice. That's awesome. Anyone else?
I personally have been either playing different video games because I've had a bunch in my library I haven't touched, or any any form of creation, like painting, digital art, anything I can make with code or CSS, just anything that's creative and expressive.
What's your what is your favorite little like hidden gem video game that you found? Because sometimes you got like this like stash of them and you start breaking them out and like some of them are better than you expected.
That would be a tie between Abzu, which is gorgeous, by the way, if you've never heard of it. It's a PS4 exclusive, though, I think.
Okay.
And Rhyme. It's like it's another artsy, puzzly expressionist game, but it's really well done. Oh, it's ABZU.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And specifically for something like that, if you have a second, feel free to drop like links to those in the chat, and then we'll drop them into the doc.
Yeah, of course.
It looks
Sweet.
like
Let's
it's
see if we
on
can get-
Steam too. It's on. Sorry,
No,
I
you're
went
okay.
down my own rabbit hole. Like, oh,
No,
what
you're
is
fine.
this?
Let's get two more in any of these categories. Either something new that's going on that you've heard about in a framework or language specific, or computer science in general. Any high five moments you've had, or how you're staying sane. Let's get two more.
I've
Got one.
Go ahead.
Sure. Was
Sorry,
that
Kyle.
Kyle and Michael? Well,
Yeah.
those will be our last two. So Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, so I started a new side project for a friend, and I was like gonna do a React app, so using Create React app and then like an Express backend. And then I found out that you can do like proxy servers through just like your package JSON. If you set like a proxy thing, it'll automatically reroute it to like the right thing, because Create React app starts its own server. You start your own Express server, and then there you go. I was like, this is pretty fucking baller.
Oh, that's awesome. Sweet. Kyle, did you want to?
Yeah,
Sure.
I've been trying to be a lot more disciplined about my morning routines. And most recently, I've been playing a lot of guitar in the quarantine. Before software, like I was a professional musician, and me and this girl have been spending about half an hour every morning together with the metronome. And it's been awesome. It like, I don't know, calms me down, gets my day started right. It's creative. I've really enjoyed just getting some practicing discipline.
Awesome, dude. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for sharing. And yeah, we'll do this again next month.
All right, let me stop sharing. And now I can't find Phil in my screen.
I'm here.
You will
Look
find
SP.
Except for whatever reason in my participants, he keeps moving.
It says
All
you've
right.
disabled screen sharing.
Yeah, I don't know how I did that, but
Well, in the meantime,
all right, well,
hash-
guess what? You're going to be host, and then you're just going to have to make Kyle host, and then Kyle make me host. We'll just do it that way. The most
like a
complicated way.
There's like a trust fall of
Yeah, you have all the
meeting
power right now,
administration.
but I can take that power.
All right, I think this will work.
That's my
Allow Zoom.
that's my life motto.
It's asking Zoom to change settings. You're
Gonna make you restart.
Yeah, I think so. Be right back.
Hold on, let me take that away from you before you hawk off. Did he already bail?
No.
No? Why can't I take... Ugh. This is a problem. I don't even use Zoom now. I use WebEx, which... Ugh. Don't do it. Not even once.
I'll make you the host again.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Got it. As soon as you said that, I found the button.
All right, I might have to quit, and then you'll give me a host again.
Fine. Well, this would be a good time to go refresh your beverage if you need to. Or make some microwave mac and cheese. Ramen. I don't know why. Oh, Sapporo. Mm-hmm.
Got a ways to go. No
Cam
refresh
check.
needed.
What y'all drinking?
Ashamed that it's not local, but I'm on unemployment.
Let's have water.
Matt Long having to get fancy on all of us.
It's just because I'm out of beer. It is Italian Pinot Grigio, but it is.
Ooh,
Oh,
Wait, you're out of beer? That sounds like a rookie move.
I am out of beer. We were supposed to go to the
Hanky's
grocery
out,
store
ladies and
this week.
gentlemen.
oh my gosh.
All right, let's try that again, Matt.
Okay.
There we go. All right. Can you still see this?
Yes.
Great. All right. Thanks for joining today. I will just back up Matt's request for speakers. If you haven't been a speaker before, definitely worth putting yourself out there and chatting. And what's great right now is that you can't see anybody. So you're basically talking to yourself. But it's really fun, just a good way to test yourself and get good questions and feedback usually afterwards. So I recommend it. With that, let's get into the talk today, which in the end is about immutability, specifically with Immer. And just real quick about me, senior front-end engineer at GoGo, and my contact on Denver Devs, and my super simple website. Wow, what a masterpiece. All right, so what's on tap? Just a quick rundown of what Immer is. What are some mutations if you're new to JavaScript or coding or programming? And then we're going to get into some other examples of how JavaScript world has tried to handle this with Immutable, and then we'll give an example with what Immer does. So Immer itself is a term for always. So if you think about what immutability is, it's a clever name. It is created by a smart guy, Michael Westrate, back in 2018, and he created MobX, which is a state library. So the concept here is you create your next immutable state tree by modifying the current tree based on the copy on write mechanism. So the copy on write mechanism essentially, takes like a current object or current shape of data, pass it through Immer, which makes a draft state for you to actually edit directly, and then it returns and writes over the state and you're as a next state. So we'll get into a little bit more details on that. The problem Immer is trying to solve, and it's not just Immer, honestly, it's any of the libraries that are out there, is that libraries like Redux are supposed to prevent mutations by performing shallow checks. However, in order for this to be a reliable shallow check comparison, you cannot mutate the data. So if you mutate the data, you could cause additional re-renders. I'll get into some other side effects in a little bit. According to Redux, though Redux enshrines a read-only state that is updated with pure functions, it's possible to mistakenly mutate the store. So that was just a nice little paragraph straight from their docs. So let's take a step back. What is mutation? Insert mandatory GIF here. Mutation is a fancy way of saying change. Now, change is not always a bad thing, but change can result in non-predictable side effects, such as that fish with 5 eyes, 4 eyes, 6 eyes. All right, so I'm going to quickly hop over to a little sandbox I made just to show some basics, vanilla JavaScript examples of what happens with mutation. Come on. All right, can everybody see this okay? I hope so.
Yep.
Great. All right, so we have our original object here, little bio. And we're going to make a direct copy of B. So you can see now that these are the same, not a direct copy of B. We're going to make B, which is a direct copy of A, or original object. And let's directly edit B and say is object false. And what happens is the original object is mutated here. So this is the concept of mutation, where the original and the direct are mutated, and that's kind of scary when you get into some bigger things. So what you can do is make shallow copies. There's a handful of ways. The ES6 spread here is a simple way to make a shallow copy. So again, we have our shallow copy, which is false. I should actually take this out real quick. There we go. And now, if you want to make some edits, we get into our spread hell, which, yeah. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I edited the job details. So now I'm a front ender at GoGo for a few months here. So I know it sounds very basic to many. At the same time, this is just a simple way to make safe, shallow copies where you copy the first level, then you copy the second level, and then you want to edit the second level and add in your new item. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go back to the code or the presentation. So some quick takeaways on the vanilla JavaScript stuff. Objects are mutable. Newly assigned objects from existing objects are referenced by the type data. So they contain the original reference. That's the key, the original reference to the value in the memory. So the new copy, if you just do like B equals A, the new one doesn't contain the actual value. It's a reference. So why does something get mutated? The reason behind it is objects are a reference. So if you create an object, it gets memory location. Nope. Okay. This memory location holds the object's value. And then this memory location links to the variable name itself. And I seem to have lost my footnote for where that quote came from. Sorry. All right, so benefits of avoiding mutations should be pretty clear. You have more predictable code if you avoid it. Your code's safer, more confidence, easier to debug. And if you do mutate, a couple things like just do a very local function where you're going to maybe like make a copy of an object and edit something and return it. But again, still worth making a copy of the variable you might be copying instead. If you're adding something global, don't mutate it. All right. So one of the really popular libraries that came about to solve this is Immutable. I've had the fortunate or unfortunate recent experience of working with it. So the case for this library is to make persistent data layers that cannot be mutated. And the data presents a mutative API, which does not update the data in place, but instead always yields new updated data. So it's a little different than copy on write, but kind of similar in that it's a copy under the hood. So what makes application development difficult is tracking mutation and maintaining state. Developing with immutable data encourages you to think differently about how data flows through your application. And that I thought was so true. I never really thought about it much until seeing errors come out. I didn't really understand what mutations were, a few years ago, but you really think about it all the time now. At least I'm speaking for myself. So let's see what Immutable does. Oh, you know what? Let's close that one. All right, so this is so high tech. Just so everything doesn't run at once. All right, so we have our kind of our same object here, same object. And Immutable makes a map, let's say. Immutable has tons of functions, map, list, ordered map, things like that. And they're really, you can even filter an object, which throws me for a loop sometimes. So it offers getters also. So instead of saying, original map.cities, you have to run this special map.getCities like this. So it's a little more verbose also when working with it. Let's try to edit map directly. I did just try to update it. However, I should just say map got is object. See, it's still true. And you can't mutate them directly. So that's awesome. Let's add the new job. You have to now do pretty similar. You don't have to do the spread operation. You now use one of their built-in functions like merge deep. And that didn't work because I'm still trying to merge in the original. However, if you make a copy of map2 and edit map2 directly, that does work. So it's a little tricky to work with, I find. One example literally is if you're trying to debug the code, this on the left, I think I can open it. Yeah, this on the left is literally the state that Immutable puts the data. Like reading through this is virtually impossible if you want to debug something. So you have to use like helper functions if you want it to look like that on the right. So the left is the Immutable's version of the same state. Right is like you run 2JS in the console, for example, to actually see what the heck's going on. So very cumbersome to work with. And that's one of the quirks, I say. Data says what? You can't, it's very hard to read. Unfortunately, Immutable adds another layer of abstraction, honestly, because it's a custom data structure. It's not like plain JavaScript, if you will. If you're working with a strongly typed language like TypeScript, apparently that's also not ideal. I have no first-hand experience with that one. If you're making reusable components, this library dependency could be a negative impact also. So enter Immer. Basically, apply your changes to a temporary draft state, which is a proxy of the current state. And similar to React set state function, these functions will thread itself to update state as a single atom at the top, according to the React.js doc. So it's the same concept, just a single thread as like one update. All right. I keep clicking that. All right, so now let's look at Immer. And Immer is really fun because it is so simple and it looks like JavaScript. So Immer itself, really, it has more than one API, but the main API is just a function called produce. So you import produce, similar to any other library, and you want to change your to-do. Sorry, I thought I had a to-do in here. I don't. Sorry. Let's to-do null. So really simple API. It looks like you're mutating it. That's the weird thing is you're editing the draft state. So you can, quote unquote, I'm going to say mutate, dot notation edit your object. So now our to-do is just copyright the draft. And you can see that I've added Brooklyn to the list of cities there from line 5 just by editing draft state directly. So that's it. Like the produce function takes your original state and offers like the copy, which is called draft, and then you literally edit draft directly. That's how it works. And that's why I had to get other topics in this talk. There's not much to go over with Immer, which is sort of the beauty of it. So bullet points, what it is. It's a simple API. Just wrap what you want to edit with produce. And it's just a function. It's not specific to reducers or Redux. You can use it anywhere. It's for any data tree you want to modify. You can even use it inside set state. I recommend if you go back to this, click this link for set state, or we can go back to it later if anybody wants to see it during Q&A. It's human readable. It's not like that immutable jargon of roots and nodes and things like that. What it isn't, it's not a global wrapper for your reducers. Apparently it's not great for IE11 support because it does use the proxy API under the hood. So keep that in mind. And it's not ideal for use with classes because it requires a special flag to preserve prototypes. I myself haven't messed around with that. That's from the docs there. So some good resources, the official docs, of course. I first heard about Immer a little while ago, over a year on this React podcast. So put that in as something to listen to with all our free time. Netlify blog was kind of nice, just talking about some pros and cons. And this other article, Worth the Hype. So with that, open it up for Q&A. And I'm going to, well, I'll keep sharing just in case somebody wants to see something.
That was cool, man. Because you talked early on about shallow clones and stuff like that, and the example that you gave, like obviously because we're just doing like a quick code sample, was a pretty simple object, but is that produce function doing a deep clone? And so like you can, so it'll go all the way down the tree to all the primitives. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. That's a great question about like, what is it doing under the hood? The copy on write mechanism, I think it's a little bit more advanced than just like deep cloning, but it essentially, yes, it does do a deep clone because there is no reference to the original anymore at that point, which is the main goal of a deep clone, is like getting rid of all references to the original, no matter how many levels deep you go. Right. I don't, that's a great question. I don't have the great answer. Hopefully maybe somebody else does.
That's okay. But the point though is that in practice though, you can go as deep into that object as you need to, and they'll all be new references, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Cool. That's really cool. I hadn't thought about using that for like things like state and stuff in React, but that's it's a neat way to not have to worry about those nested spreads, like you said. Really cool. Thanks for sharing.
So here's the example that they use, is that set state has that callback where it gives you the most updated state version. So you essentially do the same kind of concept there.
Yeah, that's super cool. And the thing is that like usually in React, right, you're like the convention is to make your state as shallow as possible and use more verbose names to do nesting so that you wouldn't find yourself in like that top case. But like, but this is like an awesome use case for situations where you have to have some kind of nesting. Yeah, I'll probably check it out. I appreciate you sharing it.
Thanks, Guillermo. Okay, silence is golden.
Let's give Phil a round of applause.
Yeah!
All right. Thanks, dude.
Kyle, I don't have host. Do you have that back, Matt?
I did.
Oh, great.
Right. And now I'm the host. My part of the show. Matt, you want me to jump right into it? You want to do break? You tell me.
Does anyone need a bio break or anything? Or
It's like 60 seconds. How about that?
60 seconds of silence, you ready?
I got the timer, Boo. Another 5 seconds. All right. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to Data Transformations with Lodash. My name is Kyle Coberly, and you can find the slides and the eventual repo and my notes on Lodash and so many other things at kylecoberly.com. So, let's talk about it a little bit. So what we're ultimately doing in this is composing a data transformation pipeline with Lodash FP. Holy shit, that's a lot of words. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about all of these words, and then I'm going to show you a demo of what it looks like when you do such a thing. So first, let's talk about data transformations. This is one of the most common tasks that you run into as a programmer. So for example, maybe you're getting something like this back from your API or somebody else's API, and you need to kind of make it look more like this. This particular example is like one from my actual life. Like that's what I got back from the API. That's what I needed to turn it into for whatever reason, because I was sending it to some other API, or I needed to like consume it that way for some component hierarchy or something like that. But like, I'd say this is like probably one of the most bread and butter tasks that you run into is reformatting data. So some examples of common transformations that you might do. The like various different maps. This is, I have some count of something. I have 3 things and I need to turn it into 3 different things. That's a fairly common transformation that we do. Or the filter family of transformations, which is nothing's changing, I just potentially want less of them. Or I need something that matches something, so like finding something. And then one of the more like complicated ones is I need to flip the values and keys of something. So I need to turn some collection into something that's indexed off of something. So it's like an array into a hash, sort of. And then I need to jam 2 things together. I need to do a shallow merge of 2 objects. I need to do a deep merge of 2 objects. I need to put 2 arrays together, combining things. These are examples of really common data transformations that, that you'll run across. And so things like what I was showing above is just a combination of these techniques. So Lodash. Lodash is a utility library. So if you've ever written a function that does something like get the difference between 2 arrays, knock it off. We have somebody else has written a super good, highly performant tool for you to do that. Or if you've ever tried to use like the native map method in JavaScript, you'll note that it only works with arrays. Well, we've got a version in Lodash that not only works with objects, it'll do things like only work with the values in an object. Debalancing a function, making sure that something isn't called more than every so often. We've got a Lodash function for that. Randomizing stuff, either getting a random number or like between 2 values, or randomly sampling something out of an array. Like everybody's had to do some function that generates something like that. Cool. Well, like in grown-up world, we've got that delivered for us already. Sorting like an array of objects by some particular property. We got a way better way to do that than the built-in one. Or clamping a number. So like you get a survey result, only takes 1 through 5. If you get a 7, it shouldn't throw an error. It should just turn into a 5. Lodash has functions for all this and like dozens and dozens and dozens of other really common use cases. These are utility functions. And my favorite part of this is the FP library. It's really easy to skip past. If you go to the Lodash site, you know, okay, cool, I want to see the documentation. And so this has all of the different utilities that they have in here, but it's really easy to blow past this FP guide that talks about how you can use all of those utility functions in a more functional way. So like if we were going to map over some numbers to double each of them in JavaScript, we'd probably do something kind of like this. Sexy, sexy Lodash. We can step that up a level. We can, like this exact same code would look like this with Lodash FP. And so some things worth pointing out about this are that it's not a method on the data, it's a standalone function. So it's something that we'll end up passing the data into. It's also curried. If you've never seen this syntax before, all this means is that the result of this is a function, which means that you can pass that into it. And there's a lot of really cool benefits for composability that come out of that. And then lastly, the data comes last. This is one of the things that like Lambda fans, which is another utility library, super like, and like regular old non-FP Lodash doesn't do, and I think makes it a little bit more cumbersome to work with. Because when you're composing functions, the big idea is that we can jam together a bunch of little tiny functions and make more complex functions out of them. So for example, let's say we take that map out of Lodash FP and we take that double. We can say, well, hey, if I map over that and pass the double in, remember, the data's coming last. So this is like another call here that we haven't made yet. That means I can make my own standalone function that takes in an array and doubles all the things. And that would end up looking like that. And since these are pure functions, like we can put these in other modules, we can tuck this away in libraries, we can do all kinds of things that give us more complex behaviors out of simple ones. So last thing is pipelines. Pipelines take this idea to its like logical next step, which is, can I use those composed functions that I made to make pipelines of transformations? So if you can imagine some numbers coming in, it maybe goes through each of these little standalone functions that we made and produces some result. And so just a quick note on syntax for this. Flow is my favorite part of Lodash FP. And what this says is, I want to take some numbers as the input. That's what like this whole thing is getting called with. That's the input to this. I'm going to pass it into this first function, and I'm going to take the output of that function and make it the input to this function. Output of that function is input to this function, and so on until we get the output. So it flows all of those together. If you've used chain in Lodash before, it's the exact same thing, except in like sane order. Chain works backwards. Same thing with like, if you've used the compose method in Lodash before. It works the same way you would do it if you were nesting functions inside of each other. This is the way you would think about it if you were thinking of it purely as a data flow. Okay, cool. That's the overview I want to do. I want to show you this in action now. So our goal is to turn this data into this data. I'm going to show you how I would approach this with Lodash FP. All right, so I've made this repo here, but there's nothing in it so far. So by ls, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. So I'm going to make a new node project. Then I'm going to install Lodash and Jest. And in the sip of a beer, maybe 2 sips, there it is, comes down. All right, so I'm gonna make a folder in here called test, and then I'm gonna make a transform.js and a spec for that. And then over in my spec, I'm going to make a, well, let's see. Over here, I'm going to run my tests. So I'll say just watch all. Oops. Really? I'll say npx just watch all. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. All right, it's mad at me because there's no tests in this file. All right, well, that's fixable. So I'm going to make a test called it do the transform real good like. And I'll say that the old data is that. And the new data is this. And I expect that if I call something called transform on the old data, that it equals the new data. And it tells me that transform isn't defined. All right, well, that's fixable. I can import it from that transform file that I made. And I go, well, hey, now it's not a function. So how about I export a transform function. Come on, man, can't type today. And if I just take the input and return it, all right, it tells me everything that's different about these two objects. This is the goal, is to square these two deltas. Now, like, interesting thing about this is, like, if you were given this task, I imagine some proportion of you would probably solve it imperatively. And like, this is what that looks like. We got some nested loops, we got some for or some if statements, we got all kinds of stuff in here. So if I copy this and just pop the whole thing in here, call that transform, I can get the test to pass. Now, there's a couple beefs that I have with this. What a like killer 1-2 punch from the last talk, because the big issue with this is the mutations. So each one of these lines is a different mutation that's happening here. And the most insidious one of these is this one, because it's a mutation that relies on another mutation having been done correctly. And like, I don't doubt that like people reading this could figure out what this code does or write it themselves. It's not like nothing crazy here, it's just ifs and fors. But I got some major beefs with this. It's really hard to decompose something like that into smaller pieces of the problem. Because you might think that you can break this into functions, but you kind of can't, because it's relying on a lot of scoping things that either end up with like these functions that take 5 arguments, or otherwise you just need to be okay with having that stuff all be in state. All of that makes it very difficult to test. You can test the entire thing, but it's hard to like gradually get there and kind of break it into pieces. That makes it very difficult to debug. One of the problems with not being able to break this into smaller pieces, if there's some part of this that we do a lot, it's hard to make that its own standalone function that we could reuse in other problems. Also, like, this is hard to read. It's not hard to like go line by line through it, but nobody can look at this and understand what it does right away. It's not using any of like our shared data transformation language. So if I wanted to break this into some smaller chunks, I'll tell you the overall strategy with this. And it's, if I have this like users hash here, so these like numbers or IDs for each of these users. But I also have user IDs on these availabilities. And so if I'm ultimately trying to smash together users and availabilities, if I can make availabilities look more like this users hash, then I can just merge those together. So that's like kind of the broad strategy behind this. There's some other things, like this availabilities array needs to like become a hash. The users thing needs to become an array. So we need to get rid of some of the properties. There's like a little bit of data wrangling we got to do. So the first step of this would be trying to take this array of availabilities and see if we can kind of like hashify it. So, all right, we'll go back to our tests, and what's this called? Group availabilities by user. So I'm going to make something called availabilities. I'll copy that in. I'm going to make something called grouped availabilities. And I'll copy this in. And then I expect that if I group availabilities by user with availabilities, it should equal group availabilities, grouped past tense. Come on. Cool. So it's saying, hey, you don't have anything called group availabilities by user. All right, so I'll fix that. I'll fix that. Then I'll make a function called group availabilities by user that takes in availabilities, and to start with, just poops them back out. So
You need a comma down on line 4 at the bottom.
thank you. All right. So now we see the actual differences between what I'm getting and what I want. So the big idea is that I'm taking some property of this and turning it into the key. So this is where Lodash comes in. Lodash is going to give us a tool called group by. And we can start by saying group by, and then just the name of the thing that we want to group on. So in this case, it's user ID. And now, if we look at the tests, this is giving an idea of what's different. It did it correctly. It just now has this extra property. Like, because group by doesn't take that property out once we put it in the as the key in the object. But that's what we need in our data transformation. So we're going to need some other Lodash tools. There's one called Emit. And there's and then to apply this to like this change that we made, we're going to need to map the values of the object that we did. And since the thing that's in each of those keys is an array, we also need to be able to map over it. So if I say grouped availabilities is this, and that's that, then I have this intermediate step where grouped availabilities is what it was before, but I want to map the values of that. And for each one of them, I'm going to take the availabilities, or sorry, I'm going to map over each of the availabilities, and I'm going to omit the user ID. And if I do that, it passes. Now, at this point, I imagine you're saying, Jesus, Kyle, who can read that? How is that any better than the imperative version? Wait, watch this. So what we can do is we can take these little pieces of this and bust them out into their own functions. So if I do something that's like group by user ID, watch how like quickly this cleans up. So, all right, well now that's its own function called group by user ID. It's a little bit better. I could also make one called omit user ID that just does that omit user ID piece. And so now I can replace that with omit user ID. All right, so if it's mapping omit user ID, you would like semantically say that as omit all user IDs. That's just map omit user ID. And so now that becomes omit all user IDs. All right, this is starting to clean up pretty nice now. And if we look at what's happening now, I have these availabilities that are the input. I apply some function to them. I take that result and I run it through something else. That's what a flow is. So if I instead make this flow, I make availabilities the input, this is just going to take an array of functions. So I group by user ID, and then I take the result of that and I map values, omit all user IDs. So if I do that, oops, flow is not fine. I got to import flow. So if I do that, we're still passing. And now this code isn't so hard to follow anymore. And with like how easy this was to test in isolation, I could fearlessly just rip stuff out and pull that together. Cool, step one achieved. So next thing I need to do, kind of similar, I need to group this group of availabilities by date. It's kind of the same thing. I'm taking an array that has this key and I'm making it the value of this object, and then I'm getting rid of the original thing. So if I copy the old value, go back over to test land. This is group availabilities by, is it date? Yeah. Group availabilities by date. Then I'll say that the availabilities are the thing that I had, and I'll say the grouped availabilities are this result. And just as a side note, this isn't just a thing that like I'm doing for the talk. When you're doing these data transformations, it's very helpful to like write out very explicitly, what do you have right now? What are you trying to get to? And then use that as the basis for a test like this. So I expect that if I do group availabilities by date and I pass in the availabilities, that should equal the grouped availabilities. It does not. I don't have anything called group availabilities by date. So I'm going to import it. Pull it in. And since this is so similar, I want to see what happens if I just kind of copy all the code and call that date. All right. If I look at the difference here, I'm in the same position I was in the other one, where I just need to drop that piece of it. So I kind of wonder if I just change the part that changes, I get passing tests. So what that tells me is that this is almost identical logic in both cases. The only thing that's changing is that date. So that makes me wonder, could I abstract that? If I say group availabilities by property, and I take in a property, well, then the question is, how do I get down to the availabilities if it's taking in the property? Especially in flow, where like in flow, you're not passing in more than one argument or anything. It's being applied for you. And so the magic trick on that is that you do it with closures. So you just have it return a function that has this thing in scope, and now you can use both of them. So if I do this and copy all this logic over, then instead of group by user ID, we say group by property. And I can make this property. Or this one, this is just property. It's not omit user ID, it's omit property, omit all properties. This is omit property. And otherwise, so this one is grouped by property, and then this one is omit all properties. Okay, and now that I'm looking at this, what do availabilities have to do with this at all? Like kind of nothing. So I can just change that to data, and it's a vague name, but this will work on just about anything. So let's see if my like abstract little function will do what I think it does. I'm going to call it group by property now. I'm going to export that. Group by property. So if I pull in group by property in my test and go back over those ones that I just did, I'm going to change group availabilities by date into group by property date, like that. And what do you know? Still passes. If I go back up to group availabilities by user, I go group by property user ID. Oh shit, it's still passing. And so now I can change these test names to like group by property number 2. This one's group by property number 1. And I can delete that and delete that. Delete that and delete that. And I can delete all of this code. And so now, not only is like my problem still like, oops, oh, still mad because I'm exporting. There we go. So now, not only is like my problem just as solved as it was a second ago, but now I have this abstract function that I can use for potentially any number of things in my app. It's a pure function. It doesn't rely on any other state existing, and I composed it out of all these little pieces. Cool, step 3. So like the problem that I have now is I'm trying to make this thing ultimately the same shape as the user's object. So the user's object has the user ID right here and their name, and then it has these days of availability. So the only real difference here is putting those days in. So if I go make a test for that, I say wrap availabilities. And I say, same as before, availabilities is that. And wrapped availabilities is this. Then I expect that wrap availabilities should give me my wrapped availabilities. All right, don't have it, no problem. Wrap availabilities, wrap availabilities. And then if I make a function for it, I can say availabilities here. And if I return it as is, then I see the difference. It's just that little days wrapper that I need to have around this. So turns out that's another instance of map values. So I'm going to take the values of this, and I want to take the availability, and actually I might be able to do this. I say days and days, and we're passing. Cool, easy sauce. So step 3 done. All right, so now what I have is these availabilities and these users, and they're formatted the same way. So all I have to do is jam them together. I need to end up with that. So the correct Lodash tool for that is merge. There's another one that sounds like it would work, and I'm spacing on the name of it right now. Assign, same way you do it in regular JavaScript, except it's shallow, and we've got nested properties in here. So merge is the right one for that one. So we're going to import in merge. And this is simple enough that we probably don't need to make it into its own standalone function. What we're going to do is go back up to this transform where we have all this like imperative logic. Bye, Felicia. And we're going to make like a transformed users. And we're going to start this data pipeline going. And it's going to start with those availabilities. This is going to use all the stuff that we just made. And then we will return users as transformed users. All right, so in this pipeline, we did group by property. And we were, see, what was the first one? First one was by user. So we're going to group by property user ID. Now we get an object back from that, so we have to use map values. We can say, all right, I want to map values group by property date, and then I'm going to wrap availabilities. And now, so this merge, occurs to me, I need to move all this up here. This merge is going to take these availabilities that are coming through my transformation pipeline, and it's going to merge them with the users. So let's see what I have in the test now. This is like pretty darn close, man. The last thing that I need to do is like unhashify this. So I'm trying to take this resulting like keyed hash that I have for the users. It wants an array, and right now it's this keyed object. All right, well, that's fixable. So I'm going to make one more. I'm going to skip that test. And all right, so we're back in Happy Land. And we need to make one more, and it's going to be called hash to array. And so I need to take something that looks like this and make it look like that. So if I say that the hash is that, and the array is this, then I expect that if I do hash to array hash, that it should equal array. Cool. Saying you ain't got no hash to array. Oh, come on, man. All right, so hash to array is there. I'm going to export a hash to array. I'm going to make a hash to array function. All right, we're getting back undefined. If I just return the hash, cool, we're in business. It's telling me the difference between these. So what I need to do is map over this. But this one, so I need to take, this is a little bit different than the one I did before. It goes the opposite directions. I need to take this and make a new property where that's inside of it. So map will work for this. You can map over objects with Lodash. Like you can't in plain JavaScript, but you can with Lodash's map. And it'll, in Lodash FP, it does a thing called capping the arguments. A lot of the, well, you would say the arity, how many arguments a function takes in regular Lodash changes, just like regular map does in JavaScript. It'll take the item in the array that you're iterating over, but the second argument is the key, and the third argument is like the original array, and like all that kind of stuff. So in Lodash FP, it's simplified. Like everything has a fixed number of arguments. But in our case, we actually need this array. So the way that you do this is kind of cool. You can make a new function called like map with key by taking map and calling this convert method on it and just saying cap false. So that will give you a map that also gives you like the that you can use on an object that will also give you the key of the thing you're iterating over. So I can say map with key, and it's going to take in the hash, and it's going to take in the value, and we'll just call that the ID. And we want to return an object. And so we'll just spread the value and then add the ID onto it. And then we can just return all of that. Does it work? Almost. Only beef now is that the data types don't match. Since this was a key, those always come in as strings. Easy enough. Let's coerce it. And we're passing. All right, so moment of truth. If I run that test and I throw this as my last transformation in the pipeline, hash to array, does it work? I see fields of green, red roses too. We have successfully made a data transformation pipeline out of these little tiny composable functions. Each one of them is like understandable in plain language on its own, plain language like in data transformation terms, at least. It's every little piece of it is testable. We can reuse it on other stuff. They're also all peer functions. I don't see a single if anywhere in the bunch. Even where I'm making like variables here, you could just as easily inline that stuff. Same thing with these. It was just more readable to organize it like that. But there's no state transformations. There's no mutations. All of this stuff is encapsulated pretty damn well. What questions do you have?
That was really cool, man. Thanks for sharing. So a question for you, like the immediate one that comes to mind is because we use Lodash a lot. We use the chain operator, and I guess maybe it depends on the version that you use, because like when we use it, it does read pretty semantically from top down. Under the hood, it might be doing it backwards, but you know it still reads like top down. What drew you to Lodash FP and using the flow syntax versus doing something similar with with the cascading nature of chain?
Sure. So the way that chain works in normal Lodash is the reason that you can chain those things is that every like Lodash function has every other Lodash function on it, which like that was the first one. I was like, that can't be right. And some of this is like I was I don't know, I was going through an FP phase. It's like there's got to be something more elegant than that. And I literally just saw that link on the website as like, I'm doing more FP stuff now. And I read through it, and it's an incredibly well-written guide to how you can apply these principles on there. And I've been doing data transformation since like my earliest days in programming, as most of what I did was data transformations. And like most people, I do an awful lot of like, save this intermediate value into a variable, save this next thing into another variables. And so you're like doing all these little steps and you're console logging all the way. And like, I was very desperate for a syntax that would streamline all of that into something like this. And I happened to see it in some example code somewhere. And I was like, that's the thing that I want to do. How do I do that? And poking around through that guide, that's what I discovered.
Sweet. Yeah, well, thanks again for sharing. That was really cool.
Awesome. Other questions?
That was very informative. I don't have a question, but that was pretty interesting to see some currying and things like that, because I don't really ever use that.
Like it has a lot more practical uses than it seems like it would on the surface. It's not just some weird, curious math abstraction. It's the way to get your functional code to look like this instead of what this looked like before I extracted those things out.
One question I have, because I've done a little bit of functional stuff, and the thing I always ran into is like how to name stuff. And I think like semantically naming what it's doing isn't too difficult, but distinguishing between like your group by property that's returning itself a function, kind of a higher order function, versus like your hash to array function that's just doing a direct transformation and not returning a function. It's like how do you keep clear which are functions and which are just data
That's a great question. And I guess my answer to it, I don't know if this is like the greatest answer, is that you try to keep the scope of all this stuff small enough, and like you could extract this stuff and it would work exactly the same. Oops, or not. But I find that like by keeping that stuff scoped pretty tightly, you're at least like reducing the amount of detective work that you have to do. And a lot of the Lodash function names are common. You'll see those in a lot of other utility libraries, even ones in other languages. And so things like emit, I know I didn't write emit. I know that I got emit for free. Same thing with group by, map values. I know I didn't make that. And so I can spot a distinction between ones that like are part of my Lodash vocabulary and ones that aren't. Now, admittedly, that takes a while to develop. And so this is linked on my website right now, actually. If you go to my Lodash notes, I went through almost every single Lodash function and organized them in a way that made sense to me. And so if like you just want a reference, I think this one's probably more handy than like the A to Z alphabetized one that that is on the website. But I'll also say that making this myself is like how I got that vocabulary. So using this maybe as a reference for how you would how you would go through that entire list of Lodash functions and make your own categorizations of these that make sense to you, I think will really help with a lot of that vocabulary.
Okay. Yeah.
Kyle, do you have recommendations for kind of how to stretch your brain to compose more functionally?
Yeah, so if you can think of some smaller transformation that you want to make, like this big one, this is intimidating. None of the little ones were. Like this is just taking this and putting it inside of this, or putting two identically shaped objects together. Or this one was like finding some way to wrap an intermediate thing. None of those are like brain breakers. The next time you run across one of those, see if there's a way that you could do it functionally. See if you can do it without if statements, without loops, with using a Lodash method or a Ramda method or something like that. Like that's the stretch, is challenge yourself to do one of those little transformations the next time you have the one with a utility method instead.
Sweet, thanks.
What else?
Well, I think we're about time. Thank you, Phil and Kyle, for presenting. Really appreciate both really awesome presentations.
Awesome.
And also, that's exactly how I imagine you, Kyle, as Jim Carrey.
Me and old Edward Nigma.
Awesome, y'all. Well, stay safe out there, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks for coming.